Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and yet playable as possible. Today I've been sent on a wee journey again by one of my viewers, and this time I had a look at Sunavalon slash Sunvine slash Sunseed, which this deck was in dire need of a budget deck profile because this deck can achieve so much even without its one support card that's still missing that is completely bonkers and might actually make this well, not this specific deck, but Sun Avalon in combination with other planned good stuff, quite competitive. But there's not that many reasons for why people would upload a deck profile that doesn't have all these crazy combos in it, because that's the only way you can really play this deck at the moment. So I decided to actually take the challenge and make a deck profile of this deck that doesn't include all the crazy shenanigans you can do with this deck, especially talking about 1/2 Aromaseraphy Jasmines, generating crazy advantage, using the Rika engine for certain kind of things, and rounding it all up with some Mardell adding to hand kind of stuff. We try to go the more calm route of this deck, which if you're lucky you can make your link 4 and set 1 or 2 spell traps and annoy your opponent a tiny bit till in your turn you put up some more board pressure, clear some of their stuff, and keep going for a few turns till your opponent gets frustrated by the fact that they cannot attack your link monsters and cannot damage you if the wee trees are on the field. So let's talk about the cards. Obviously this card is very, very important to this deck because loads of your cards actually need you to have this on board, which is a bit annoying because there's not that many cheap ways to get to this card. One cheap way is Unexpected Die. It's cheap because you already have it, because you get it in the tutorial, so we do not have to craft this one, which makes the deck a lot cheaper than it would be otherwise. Another way to get it is, and this is a big topic of this deck, either Painful Decision, because that card searches your card to your hand, but if you draw this with 2 of them in hand, it's kind of useless. But, well, that's how it is. I guess it's the same for opening with a triple or double Unexpected Die. Another thing that you can run instead of this card is, though, Draconet. And there's 2 different ways why you should run this or this. This one technically gives you the advantage of having 1 more monster on board, but this card is a lot more volatile to hand traps. It's not only Ash Blossom that's very dangerous to it, but also Effect Veiler, Infinite Impermanence. So it's kind of a hit or miss with this one, and I feel like more people would Ash this card than they would Painful Decision, in my opinion. It depends on what you want to be running. If you have either of those cards, run either of them. This card can be good in certain FTKs, or at least was, because you could get like a tuner kind of monster out of your deck, and this card can be played in stuff like Metal Foes. So there's applications and reasons why you should either craft this card or this card, and if you don't have any of them, basically up to your own personal preference. This card takes your normal summon, which can be quite conflicting sometimes, but this card will take up your normal summon, but at least if it's getting ashed, you can still normal summon something else, and it's a good ash bait, so I've decided to go with Painful Decision, but in the end, it is a painful decision which card to choose. Angel Trumpeter is a card that I do run at 1. I tried to run it at 2 because of Painful Decision, but I felt like it didn't really matter, because if you already have one of these in hand, then you don't really need the other card from your deck anyway, so it doesn't really make that much of a difference. But 1 Angel Trumpeter actually does help because your Sunvine Link 1s all need a normal monster that is planned, which this card is, plus it's 1900 attack, which can come in handy if you want to use the effect of your Sunavalon Bloom to boost up the attack points of your Link 4 monster. So 1900 points can be quite nice, because you can revive this card actually with a Sunvine Shrine, because it only special summons 1 level 4 or lower plant normal monster, and not just specifically Sunseed, Genius, Loki. So this is actually a card that made a lot of sense in the deck. You could run some synchro shenanigans, but I decided not to. Another card, Spore, which would help you to enable some planned synchro stuff, didn't decide to go for it, but this card is a nice extender because you can summon it once at least from the graveyard by banishing another plant monster. Another extender is Aromage Laurel, which you mainly be able to summon by using Sunvine Healer as an effect. Rika Petal, and with it the small Rika engine that I decided to include, which you don't have to, but hear me out, it's actually quite neat. This card recurs itself every time from your graveyard into your opponent's end phase, so you can use the effect first of all every turn, and you also have another link material on board, a link deck, which is quite nice. Also, it has some other kind of things you can do with it. You can search the Rika Fairy with it, which is quite neat, because it gives you, if you don't get into your Sunavalon kind of stuff because you didn't find a way to get into the normal monster, you at least have another disruption for your opponent's turn, because with it you can search the fairy, with the fairy you can search Ricochet, and so on and so on. So it actually does do quite a lot of things. Another card you run into this deck then with the Rika engine would be one Rika Glamour. Like I said, again, you wouldn't have to run it, but this card can actually search your Sunseed Shadow, which is nuts. Well, it's a seed, but it is important in the deck, and it can actually, in combination with the normal monster, can get you to your Link 4, which is very good. And since this is a level 1, this is a level 1, it works with the effect that you tribute one monster and then go on from there. Also, you can add a Snowdrop the Rika Fairy to your hand, which can be quite nice, summoning certain cards out of your hand, mainly stuff like Sunseed Twins, because this card does stuff on special summon. And yeah, back in when I tried it first out the deck, I didn't go for Parallel Exceed, and I ran stuff like Evil Thorn if you prefer this over Parallel Exceed, which would also work quite nice with this Rika Fairy. In general, just gets you bodies on board. It's not terrible, and if you have the money, or if you have the crafty materials, you could go for like the Rika Teardrop, for example, and run this card as well, because with this effect you could at least go into this, so it would be a neat small Rika engine in the deck. I run one Sunseed Twin. It can be quite nice and it can help you build up some advantage. But the problem is this card mainly only works if it's summoned out of the hand with a Snowdrop, or if it's normal summoned after you summoned your Sunseed Genius Loci with Unexpected Die, or with 1-for-1. So I decided only to play it at 1. You could bump it up to 2 if you want to, but I felt like at 1 it was genuinely fine. You can't search it, but it's another extender-ish kind of monster. 1 Ash Blossom because it's a good disruption tool, and that's what you try to do. Plus you get this basically for free, so I don't count it as an ultra rare you have to craft. Rose Girl is a nice card, would also be able to help you go into stuff like Herald of the Arclight, for example, if you want to run this card. Could do that. It recurs itself every turn. It's a bit slow because then you can't special summon it by its effect, but at least you have another normal summon if you run out of them, for example. So this card can be quite nice. World Carrotway Champ is quite nice. You have to not run it at 2. I like it at 2, but in the end 1 could be fine if you have a different card. A lot of people play Zephyros and go on from there, the Blackwing card, because you can bounce your Sunvine Shrine back to your hand, get Zephyros out, and so on and so on. There's loads of kind of things that you can do with this, and since you take like effect damage, then it triggers your Sunavalon Dryas and all of the wheat trees. So if you want to go for Zephyros, you should, but you can even search it with like some kind of rank 4, but it's an elaborate combo that costs loads of ultra rares, and Zephyros also is an ultra rare, so I felt like not including this combo either. Instead I ran 2 carrot weight jams. You don't really want to draw these cards like at once, but if you do, then what can you do about it? Already explained the Ricker Parage. Parallel Exceed is actually a combo because you play in a Link deck that can get you into your Link 4 quite easily, is because you run a generic Link 2 with Proglio, a card that you get for free. I just decided to include this, but you can play basically any other card. This card has the advantage that you can also link off stuff like Baguska, which would work well with Parallel Exceed. You don't have to run Baguska again. It's just a nice card that would help you strengthen your go first if you draw into Parallel Exceed and you have like no other place that you could do, or you want to specifically go for this card. But you can also run any other rank 4 if you want to, or just in general go for kind of different extra cards if this one is too expensive for you, because Parallel Exceed doesn't only work for Baguska, it also works for, well, don't want to say Proglio, but any Link 2, because then you can go into your Link 4 quite easily, because this card only uses 2+ Link monsters. It never says plant Link monster, so you can actually go into this with any kind of Link monster, which is nice. Another card you could be running is Update Jammer. It's quite nice arrow wise, and also could enable an OTK, but the problem is you couldn't link away cards like Baguska or even the monsters that you revive with Sunvine Thrasher. So actually Update Jammer is a bit difficult with this one, but you could also run it if you want to. Monster Reborn, because it's a nice extender, 1-for-1, definitely needed. Sadly, it's an ultra rare that you have to probably craft. It's good for a lot of decks, so it's not a completely wasted card, but you want to have as many ways as possible of getting into this card, so I would definitely say run 1-for-1. Also, you can go into cards like Sunseed Shadow or Rika Petal, which is quite nice in this specific deck. Obviously, we run at least 1 Sunvine Shrine because it's searchable, but I decided to go for 2 because sometimes you can search actually 2, and you wouldn't really want to be activating both during your turn, because you'd have to discard twice, which in one turn will not be easy, but you could actually use the effect of this card multiple times per turn, because it's not hard once per turn. So if you have the discard, you could use the effect twice, and over time, if you keep grinding, then having 2 of this on board is actually quite strong. But you could cut 1 if you feel like it's not handy enough for your special needs. Forbidden Chalice, a card that's good going second and going first. Can set it. You can disable your opponent's monster effects if you actually happen to needing to go second. This is a card you would be replacing with any kind of good hand trap if you have any. Ricochet is a searchable card, and it's a nice card in a plant deck. The effect, if you don't tribute a plant monster, isn't that strong, but it works against certain kinds of decks. Some Dragon Maiden things for the battle phase, it's quite nice for the effect. Works against Blue Eyes Alternative Dragon, if that's something that matters to you. Basically all cards that do not trigger on summon, this card can stop even without tributing a plant monster, but also you mainly will have a plant monster to tribute as well. So on Judgment, a good card because your monsters are not protected by spell trap card removal, so yeah, you have to watch out a little bit, and this card can save you. On top of this, same with Polynosis, helps you actually protect your monsters, but you don't want to run too many of this card because you have to tribute a plant monster, which you can do once, but you don't really you're not really able to do this like twice per turn, so running it at once seems fine. A card I haven't talked about right now is Sunvine Maiden, and it's more because it is in conjunction with stuff like Solemn Judgment, because this is not a combo piece. This is not a card that you special summon out really. This is a card that protects your Sunavalon Link monsters, which it's okay. It's not great, but it actually helps you stay alive a bit, which is kind of neat. And it's searchable with the Rika spell as well. If you really wanted, you could cut it if you like. It did come in handy a few times for me, but I wouldn't say it's the most necessary card to run. But since this is more like a pure Sunvine, Sunavalon kind of deck, I felt like including it one wouldn't be too harmful. You definitely need to run triple Sunavalon Dryas and triple of the Link 2, because you cycle through them a lot and you need link monsters for basically everything. So these cards come in very handy, and sadly there's not a good way of recurring them. There's this link monster that they have, but you need, like, going into a Link 2, then tribute a monster to tuck stuff back in your extra deck is a bit iffy sometimes. You could run stuff like Paw of Avarice. It's not great, but it's also not terrible to run. If you draw it first turn, usually you won't have 5 monsters in your graveyard, especially not on this variant, but you could go for it in the grind game. Could run this card over the Link 3 if you like. This card has this neat effect that you can negate an attack, and it's really annoying because you keep regaining life if your opponent attacks. If you can't make the Link 4, if your opponent doesn't have a way to get rid of it by card effect, then this can pose quite a threat for your opponent. But if you rather want to run the Link 2, that also makes sense. Another ultra rare that you could take out is this one. It does facilitate like OTKs because it can make your Thrasher attack twice, but the problem is I wish this card would have different link arrows. If it pointed down, then you could use it to climb into your Link 4 as well, which like this you cannot, because you already need like another monster on board, because you need 2 link monsters for this one, and this only summons back the normal monster. But it's still nice to keep climbing up and keep gaining resources, so I would say run it. But if you rather want to run stuff like the Aroma, Seraphy, Jasmine, you could also do that, even though without Mordel and other certain cards. This card does not have the payout that you would want it to have, sadly. And lastly, the Link 4 is the reason you run this card only at 1, because you can search it with it. You could run it at 2, but I felt like sometimes you draw it then and you can't go into your Link 4 because it's not that consistent. So running 2 felt a bit strange, actually. Run it out of your preference, but this card is definitely must have in a Sunavalon deck, because that is your crazy boss monster. And yeah, I would definitely run it at 1. If you have it at 2, possibly run it at 2, but I felt like 1 feels fine. If your opponent gets rid of this, then usually there's not much of a comeback you have anyway. Well, this is the deck profile. Hope you enjoyed the deck profile. Let me know if you have any other suggestions, and hope you're having a good day.